Roelf Meyer, thank you so very much for giving us your time here on CheckPoint. We really do appreciate it. In the not so distant past, you and our current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, were sort of the poster boys of reconciliation in South Africa. Do you think the reconciliation project has failed?
No, it definitely didn't fail, especially if one looks where we're coming from. And let me just, correct one impression, and that is that it was not only him and I.
But you were the poster kids, you were the poster boys.
That's very kind of you. Maybe to
you
say
almost
that.
represented, you had that image that South Africans could work together. I think that was what many people saw in those days.
I think it helped. I think it helped. It was a matter of, the face of black and white coming together and working together, like you say.
And of course, you were the lead negotiators between the two sides during the negotiations.
That helped. And the fact that we, established an understanding, a basis of understanding, which developed into trust, helped a lot to convey that message. And it was not as if we didn't have our own skirmishes around the negotiating table. But the point is, every time, once there was a dispute that we found difficult to resolve, we had to get back to the table. We knew it. There was no other way. We had to find a solution. And so it helped us to say in the end to each other, there's not a problem that we can't resolve. And that's very powerful when you can say it to your opponent, because it means I rely on you and you rely on me. And we have to find jointly the answers. But coming back to your question, I don't think the project failed.
There seems to be such a chasm between black, white, and now we even have colored parties in South Africa, where we were supposed to be one nation, and it seems we are fragmenting more. I don't know how you see it.
I think that the outcome of the project, the democratic project, never intended to deliver only one party or to deliver one unified political base or system or whatever.
But one South Africa, wasn't it?
One South Africa.
Yes.
I think that's still everybody is bound to. I don't think there's difference about that. Even the far right wing at the moment would not dispute the need for finding an answer for one united South Africa.
I don't
and the
think
same on
so.
the left.
There are people who feel that the coloreds have been left behind in this reconciliation project. There are people, white people, who feel black people are taking too much and continue to take. There are black people who feel that whites have taken too much and continue to take. Those are the kinds of noises that I'm talking about when I ask you, has reconciliation failed? We all want to live in South Africa, but everybody seems to feel unfairly treated in their own country.
I hear what you say and I understand what you say, and I think there is a point in that. Because what we probably failed to do or failed to succeed with is the fact that we didn't complete the socio-economic transformation of the country.
It's about economics.
Exactly. How people experience their livelihood today. And that's across the spectrum. And so the first thing they blame is the other. It's very easy to say, but it's your fault. I see it when people complain about the ANC, for instance. It very easily gets a racial or a ethnic connection. It's so and so. It's them that make the mistakes. And I think that is what we have to look into and find an answer for. Our constitution is a good model for a country like ours.
Some people want to change. They say it's the problem.
Well, because of the complaints they have about service delivery, the state of the economy, etc.,
and immigration,
and the fact that we didn't succeed, like I said, with the socio-economic transformation of the country. When we when we completed the Constitution, the negotiations, I, by means of a thumbsuck, said to myself, it will take us 15 years.
1-5. To do what?
To complete the socio-economic transformation as envisaged by the Constitution, because it's there.
To correct the backlog.
Exactly. And it's all contained in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, those aspirations. But now it's more than 30 years later, and we have hardly made any progress with regard to that part of the project. And so we have to ask ourselves, where did we fail?
But wasn't the legacy left by apartheid that humongous, that so many people were left behind?
I think it's partly true in terms of the hugeness of what we had to address, coming over decades and centuries, in fact.
And there's population growth over and above all of that.
Over and above,
yeah.
Not only from within, but also across the borders.
Yes.
So all of those brought about challenges. But then one also has to ask the question to ourselves, did we do enough with the opportunities we had? And I don't think we did. And the question, quite frankly, is why have we not succeeded in that regard? And
why didn't we?
Maybe what we should have done was to develop the next level of the project, or the second phase of the project.
The plan.
A plan.
Mm-hmm.
A plan that could be and would have been implemented.
And so, RDP, was that not supposed to be the plan?
RDP was the idea, but RDP was stopped after 2 years in 1996. And then came GEAR. GEAR delivered on economic growth, very well done for Trevor Manuel and others.
Thabo Mbeki.
Mm-hmm. We succeeded as far as that is, but he didn't deliver the transformation, and that is why we're still struggling. And
to the level that we needed.
Absolutely. That's the point. So, now we're sitting here and ask ourselves what we could have done. And maybe what we should have done was, immediately after the completion of the Constitution, was to tackle the next phase of the project, to say, okay, how are we going to implement these aspirations contained in the Constitution? Mm-hmm. And I think that is quite frankly something we should have done.
And there needed to be an economic model with timeframes and deadlines.
Absolutely.
And achievables.
And monitoring the results. The results. And that is, we came with the National Development Plan some years later. And the government produced a document which is a pretty good document.
It is, but 2030 is around the corner. I was thinking about it. But the National Development Plan speaks about aspirations that need to be met in 2030.
Absolutely. It's just 4 years from now. And if you now ask people, even in government, what is the content of the National Development Plan, I don't think they will be able to tell you. Because it's almost as if it was produced, the document, the plan was there, but it was put on a shelf. And we don't see the results. It was not implemented in the way that it was foreseen. So we're still back at the same question. What do we do? How are we going to make sure that implementation happens of good plans and policies? It's not as if there's a failure of policies, even good plans, but it's a failure of implementation and execution. It speaks so loudly when we look at local government.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on AfriForum? They've almost created themselves as like a parallel South Africa with Afrikaans universities, and now there's an Afrikaans Uber and all of those things. There's almost like one language-based movement that is moving in its own trajectory.
Look, they are setting examples that can be followed, undoubtedly so. And government can also worthwhile have a look at that, because they are setting examples that work. And one can say to yourself, if they can do it, why not the rest of the nation?
But why can't that be done as a South African project, even if it's private? I'm just thinking of myself. I'm Tswana. If I had a Tswana university and Tswana Uber, how does that help the South African society that we're trying to build?
I wanted to say, and that is my problem with AfriForum and those, and that is that they do it on an exclusive basis. I'm an Afrikaner myself. At by heart, I'm an Afrikaner, but I'm first of all a South African. And I think that distinguishes my view from theirs, because they are only, exclusively, Afrikaans in their view. And in my discussions with them, I've often said, the difference between them and I is that they have this exclusive priority sense, and I'm inclusive in my approach. So the ideal would be, and that is what I would advocate with them, is to say, make your purpose inclusive, first of all, as a South African. And then you can talk about how are we going to take it forward to the benefit of the whole nation and everybody. And let me take you back and to remind us all of the fact that we had a referendum in 1992, which F.W. de Klerk called amongst white people only.
Yes.
With the consent of Madiba, to say, are you in favor of change or not?
Yeah, which way do we go?
In other words, are you prepared to scrap apartheid and to make a new beginning? That was the question, yes or no? And 70% of the white people said yes, but the 30% were there.
And are still here.
And are still here.
Yeah.
And
For their generation.
And they are represented by AfriForum and those who are thinking that way. So I think it's not only a matter of fear, it's ideological as well. They want to be on their own.
Here.
Here. And that is what I completely differ from, because I think it's to their own long-term detriment to take that view. You can survive for the time being, but overall, it's not in the interest of the nation. We can be so much more beneficial as a country if we have everybody working together. And let us have an honest discussion also with them to say, okay, what is it that really bothers you? If it's ideological, let us put our minds together and address the root of the problem. If it's only fear, then those fears can be addressed and removed. But I don't think it's only fear. I think it goes deeper than that.
And what kind of answers do you get from them when you say, look, as a united South Africa, we can go so much further than if you have these silos of excellence on your own?
It's not easy to have a debate with them.
Really?
And it might be better for people not like me to have that debate and have that discussion.
Oh, because you're a traitor or something?
They see me often as a traitor. It's got nothing to do with the substance, but they want to blame somebody, and it's very easy to blame me, because that is how they see the world that they live in and that they're used to, and that is the historic reference that they have. But I think the debate is necessary, and I think it's necessary that we ensure that we bring forward all and everybody in this country, and we're talking about them now. The same would apply to the other side. I mean, I've never been engaged in a discussion with Julius Malema, but I would certainly love to do that, because I think it's important that also his contribution is being made available for the benefit of all, and not only for a particular segment of his support base. And the same would apply to MK, who's being seen, at least, as a Zulu party only. And that can't be representative of the nation. So I think those discussions, those debates, we should open. And this brings me to the whole subject of the national dialogue. I support it fully. That is why I agreed to be part of the eminent persons group in the first instance, and to help to guide the process and to give advice and to provide guardianship for the national dialogue. But because I think through opening ourselves to such a debate or debates, because there will be plenty of dialogues, can help us to open our minds. If you and I are sitting here and be prepared to talk to each other from our different viewpoints and share our views, there might be much more in common than what we know. And that is the problem, like you started off by referring to the fact that we are seemingly in different cocoons today in South Africa. So the national dialogue can help us to get out of those cocoons.
But it seemed to fall apart even before it started. It seemed chaotic. And I don't know if there's going to be another session of the dialogue. I mean, what are your thoughts around how it is manifesting?
Can I remind you, before we started the negotiations at all, there was a period of 2 years of talks about talks. I'm talking about the period after Madiba was released from prison. 1990, 1991.
And people were dying.
And people were dying. There was a lot of political violence. And we were scratching the surface. We were talking and talking, but going nowhere until we reached the point where we could sit down and start negotiating and have proper dialogue. I think I'm seeing something of the same. You know, there's a contestation of different views. We've seen the legacy foundations disputing what is happening as far as the preparations for the dialogue is concerned. I hope in the end everybody will come together. I hope the process can take such momentum that it will gather the support and make it possible. I've spoken to Flip Buys as the chair of Solidarity Movement. And I said to him, please come along. You might differ and we might not agree with you, but the reality is if we speak out in the interest of South Africa as a country and in the interest of all of us, then we can make a difference.
And what does he say?
He was prepared. He said he will consider it. I'm not sure whether he's able to convince his colleagues. That we will still have to see. But again, my point is, dialogues doesn't mean it's a national dialogue only. It has to compose of a lot of activity on a bottom-up approach basis. It has to start from the grassroots level. And there are already indications that people are prepared to talk to each other at that level. But it's going back to the real thing, or things that bother people, that frustrate them, that make them feel unhappy. And that has to be raised through such debates and in events and opportunities where we can speak to each other very openly.
What were your thoughts when you first heard Donald Trump talk about a white genocide?
I was laughing it off. I heard it that Monday morning because he made the pronouncement on the Sunday evening on that side. And the next morning, which was the Monday, I heard this and I said to myself, this is crazy. It can't be true. It must be fake. You know, how ridiculous is it to even mention something like that in South Africa?
But he was being fed that information by South Africans.
Exactly. He was fed that information either by South Africans or Americans who were here and heard it from South Africans on the ground. And my impression is that was very much part of his set of information. People who came here, maybe as tourists, maybe as game hunters, and they had opportunities to exchange with people on the ground, Afrikaans people on the ground, who created this noise, this story, which is not even a story because it's just fake.
But Solidarity and AfriForum, they had been making moves to get his ear and get the struggle of the Afrikaner on his to-do list.
I think his reaction was not necessarily based on that. I won't give credit, quite frankly, to AfriForum for that. Yes, they might have aligned themselves with that line of thinking in the United States. We all know that they went to Washington on more than one occasion and all that. But I am doubtful whether it's them who actually put that into the ear of Donald Trump.
They've denied it officially, that they've never used the term white genocide. But what did you think Trump was trying to do? Just being Trump, or what was he trying to do?
That's very difficult because one doesn't know the person, and I don't want to make accusations which also could be fake and not carry the truth. But what worries me, and I'm going back to the argument that I put forward earlier, in 92 we had the referendum amongst whites. Those whites, the 30% that voted against change, essentially wanted apartheid to stay. That was at the root of it. That was the ideological base. And if you compare that to modern day thinking about this whole subject, it amounts to white supremacy. And there is an amount of that right now in the United States. We all know it. I'm a regular visitor to the United States. I'm actually doing work there at one of the universities. And I come across this every time I'm there. And I hear the noise. And if that is being translated into the policies and the executive order of Mr. Trump, then it's very unfortunate, I would say. But that is the connection that comes across. Now, the point of view I want to get across is to say, be cautious if you go on that route. Because what you essentially are therefore arguing as far as South Africa is concerned is that we must go back to apartheid. That is the net result of what he's doing through his executive orders.
And your argument is that 30% is there, and we as South Africans need to be conscious of the fact that we still, among us, have people who want apartheid, who never wanted it abolished.
I think so, unfortunately. It might be a small minority in terms of the total. I mean, today you can ask yourself, what is the 30% in the total complex of the nation? But whether it's 10 in terms of numbers or 100 or a few thousand, the reality is those noises are still coming through. And we have to look at how we can actually change that.
Can it be changed? I mean, if it's an ideology,
isn't
it harder to change than if it's a circumstantial, kind of thinking or basis?
That's the problem, and that's why I'm addressing it as an ideology, because it goes deeper than just the everyday experience of people living under economic strain or whatever.
It's deeper than affirmative action and BEE and all of the things that...
But because some of the people that are speaking like that or raising their voices in this regard are quite well-to-do. Seriously.
Yeah.